Welcome to the news segment from the Roll for Crit podcast. This week, we were joined by the game designer of Oathsworn and Farsight, Jamie Jolly. Let's see what news we have to discuss today, this week, October 25th, 2021.
So much to see and do. Actually, first news roundup, I do want to check in with you, Jamie, because I'm sure people listening to this will be interested if there's any updates or news about Oathsworn, or also just, I know you were at Spiel just recently, we were talking about a little bit before, and kind of what that show was like for you guys, in the current world that we live in, how successful it was for you.
It was fantastic. Yeah, we had wall to wall demos all week. I think we did 320 demos. So that was a lot
Wow.
of whacking rats. We were playing a game called Whack-A-Rat, and everyone had to try and kill the broodmother in one round, or else everybody at the table died. And there was a lot of bones left over. But yeah, it was just we must have killed like 20,000 rats that week.
You should have had like a kill counter just up for every demo, and you just have it slowly grow.
That would be great. Yeah, we should do that next time. Bring a bigger clock and just tick it up every time something dies. But yeah, no, it was fantastic. And it was really nice because it was the first time we'd actually got to show the community the actual production quality copies of a load of the stuff, like the terrain and the models and the boards and stuff. So that was really nice, because up to this point everything's kind of been prototypes or advanced prototypes. So so the most asked question we had was people coming up to us going, "Is that really how big that is?" And you'd be like, yeah, that rat is really as big as a real rat. That's how it went. And so yeah, it was pretty epic. But so it was really lots of, the people that were really engaging with everything. There was lots of kind of buzzing going around. But at the same time, it was a much smaller event than usual. And so they apparently normally it's, you've got so many people, it takes you 20 minutes to walk about 10 paces, because you're just sort of all wedged in like sardines trying to move between the stalls. So a lot of people were saying it was better like that. And I heard that same thing at UK Game Expo. Like the games it was funner to just be there and play games, and you got to just do a lot more of what you wanted to do because there wasn't so many queues and things. But at the same time, there was a lot less people than usual. So maybe it felt like maybe a third or a half of the sort of the usual count. And of course, a lot of the big publishers weren't there as well. So there was a lot of stuff that, was kind of like big release moments and things like that people were expecting. They sort of didn't have them this year. So it was nice. It was more homely, but not as big and all singing, all dancing as usual.
Yeah, I think we had a very similar experience at Gen Con. It seems to be the thing right now I'm sort of torn on it, because it's, you don't have as much excitement or hype for some big releases, but it also is just so nice to be able to walk around and not bump into 8 million people stampeding over you. So it's kind of like, it would be nice if we could find a way to have a middle ground to keep this going in the future. But as soon as I think safety regulations keep lifting, there's still 1 million people who want to go. So I don't think it's going to stay that way, for better or worse.
I mean, for me, I think this is just the evidence of I think we've reached the point where another show could be done. Right. Gen Con West,
Yes, for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean the industry is growing so much, so quickly, right? So it's even it's not just that we'll go back to how it was before the pandemic. We're going to be 40% bigger than we were before the pandemic as a community. Right. That's crazy to think, right? Absolutely crazy that we're going to be that big, and still we're going to have the same conventions that are trying to fit all these people in and stuff. So there's going to be even more kind of things. As you say, it's got to build to a pressure point where eventually loads more of these kind of other indie conventions, smaller conventions, or they just start splitting up into multiple conventions. It's going to have to happen, because you just there's no more halls left in a lot of these convention centers to be able to fill more people in. The industries are so massive, and of course with everyone being at home for 2 years, a load of people found a new love for games. Loads of people got into the industry. So it's been a weirdly amazing year for board gaming generally, although it's been an absolutely rubbish couple of years for the world.
Yeah, it's a strange time that we live in. Very, very strange. But I'm glad to hear that you had a good time at the show, and that things are changing, but they're going well. There's silver linings to be had, at least. And we'll get into some more news right now, some more silver linings perhaps. This is just first off a quick follow-up from last week, where we learned that a bunch of Paizo workers were forming a union as a result of some negative conditions in the workplace. Of course, the company behind role-playing game Pathfinder, and pretty quick turnaround. We had talked about well, mostly Will informed me about some of the behind-the-scenes proceedings of how unions get recognized, and Paizo as a company has gone ahead and voluntarily recognized the United Paizo Workers Union, meaning that they are now officially seen as a union. They don't have to go through a bunch of red tape and paperwork and have to fight to be seen as a union. They have that power now, and the next step is for them to meet and figure out what their quote unquote demands are. That feels pretty aggressive. I don't know if they call them their demands, but the things that they want to get done.
Yeah, I think it's like the role of bargaining or something.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, collective bargaining agreement is what they call it. Jamie, so we talked about this last week, but now we have someone who's in the industry. What's your opinion on the idea of this union being formed for Paizo? Is that something maybe you think we would see for other companies as well?
Well, I suppose it's in a way like unions and things like that. I think tend to be a sign of a maturing industry, right? Like we're getting big enough that those sort of relationships at like large scales tend to happen. Because I think things like unions and stuff like that, they tend to come into practice when you start seeing a lot of employees or a lot of people in a workplace. And up till recently, we just haven't been that big. A lot of most publishers are very small. Just a 1 or 2 man teams often, and then sometimes we get these slightly bigger ones. But certainly this is a sign of growth that we're kind of getting bigger and we're getting maturer. And then like how we go forward from that, well, that's always the messy part, right? Like whether or not how things work out for the best. How can we get the look after all the employees as we grow? And certainly protecting against things like burnout and things like that. Because one thing I don't think we want to do is turn like the computer game industry, because obviously we look with like the computer game industry kind of trailblazed a lot of this kind of like massive explosive company growth, sort of models where people would make a game and suddenly become big and they'd have all these people they'd be employing and things. And unfortunately, like the computer game industry is super well known for just being a place of burnout and just really rubbish kind of workplace environments and all sorts of things like that. So I really hope we don't get there with board games. I hope, and I trust that we don't, because I think part of what we have as a DNA as a community is that we care about each other very dearly. We hold the value of each other quite highly, and often there's this kind of rallying around of each other. And we're still just in a space where we don't just see publishers as just some faceless company. Still, like there's still people behind it, and there's relationships there. So, yeah, I think that I'm hoping that we don't get to that position where we end up kind of becoming known for burnout and excessive work, like life,
crunch
kind of thing. Yeah, crunch, right?
I don't know. I think right now Activision Blizzard is like the best place to work.
I've been applying there all week. I'm really hoping to get a position. It is definitely a sign of growth. As we said, that 40% or whatever it might be of we keep growing and having to get bigger and bigger. I imagine things are also, I have no idea. So I really mean, I just imagine that things are different over in the UK versus America in regards to, I don't know how unions work and company worker relations and these kinds of things. But it sounds
you
like
get them on both sides. You get in kind of both. So it's because like you have some unions that are known to be incredibly strong and they can sort of dominate the business they're a part of, and so they kind of start becomes really problematic to actually get things done when the union is so powerful that like nothing can be passed without their approval. But then at the same time, at the other side you get places where there aren't unions and that actually the workers don't have voices and they don't feel like they have a voice. They're not represented enough, and certainly that becomes problematic as well. So it's right. It's like it's a spectrum, and it's and finding a healthy place in the middle of that, I think, is the game.
In other words, turns out it's bad if someone has too much power.
Yeah.
That old thing.
What is really, I think, great about this and important is that what's always hard for, I mean, not just making a union, just anything in general, if there isn't something you can look to as an example. And now, like, look, here is a board game union.
Right.
Other companies or workers, can now be like, all right, this is the method to get it done. And it's more acceptable now because it's happened. And we see that happen everywhere, for better, for worse. That's how a lot of bad habits can occur. It's because other people do them. So why can't I? So seeing a union like this form, I would not be surprised if we start seeing other more board game related unions pop out everywhere. Once again, like you alluded to earlier, Jonathan, with the I don't know how that works nationally,
Right.
but
Yeah, and a good also a good example for other publishers to see. Paizo could have made this harder for them, but it's nice that other publishers might now see. Oh, well, they recognize their union and like the sky didn't fall down. That they're still operating. Everything seems okay. So maybe they'll be if this comes up again, they'll be more likely to try that.
well, hold on. They'll have to wait and see if they made $10 less now, then it's a no go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. $10 that can get you a lot. All right, so
I mean, have you been to Taco Bell? That
I have.
that can get you a whole.
That'll feed me for 3 days. So that is the Paizo update. We'll see in the weeks and months to come how that continues to develop. It's one of those stories I'm sure we'll be coming back to. But let's talk about some fun new games that have been announced. This first is a real big one. Hasbro / Avalon Hill announced a new game called Risk Shadow Forces, which is essentially a sequel to Risk Legacy, which is arguably one of the most impactful board games that is in board game history. Certainly in modern board games, we've seen a huge crop of legacy games, campaign games, all kinds of things that have come out of that design. This new one is obviously not using that title anymore. It's also a different designer. It's from a guy named Craig Van Ness, who has done a bunch of interesting licensed games, including Risk. Sorry, not Risk. Star Wars: The Queen's Gambit, which later became Star Wars Risk, and the original Star Wars Epic Duels, which became the template for Unmatched that's available today. So he's got some interesting designs under his belt. And this new game, it's also a legacy game, meaning for anyone who doesn't know, you're going to be opening envelopes and placing stickers and having permanent effects on the game. It takes place in the future of the real world in the year 2050, where basically the governments have collapsed, things are going nuts, and warlords have come up, and you play as one of these warlords fighting for power. And a couple other new things in this one, there's going to be a skirmish board. So during the game, you might kind of zoom in on the action and have a little tactical battle separate to the main board, which still looks like the map of the world. However, it looks like they've altered the map too. It's got different types of spaces on it that I'm guessing are better at balancing. So you don't have the famous Australia problem of classic Risk. And there's also now players have cards, and there are factions you'll be drafting before each game, and you'll be able to use those faction cards along with your warlord's powers to accomplish different effects. There's a lot going on here, and there's still stuff we don't know. This game's for pre-order right now, but it's not scheduled to come out until next year. Jamie, were you a original Risk Legacy fan? Does this design sound intriguing to you?
Oh yes, yeah, it was amazing. So when you were saying that they'd alter the map, I had images of some like they've decided to work out just kind of what countries might be underwater, and like so England is no longer there. It's just gone because we've been flooded or something.
Yeah, the map is still the same, but it's like they have hexes that are instead of like there's some bigger and smaller hexes in each country or continent that kind of. It looks like the places you actually put your figures are different, if that makes sense.
Are they leaning into the kind of it's the real world aspect of it, like it's supposed to be a prediction of 2050?
It's hard to tell. There's an interview with them. They talk with this article from Polygon where they do say specifically, "Oh, we wanted to talk about real world stuff. We wanted to take into account things like climate change and stuff like that." So I am sure it has an element of fantastical nonsense to it, but it does sound like they are trying to be more. I don't know if grounded is the right word, but.
Yeah, I think that would be the better way to view it. From what I can tell, they want to be more like, I guess
it's still a sci-fi like game, but they're trying to bring in.
I would say it's like more 007 than less like Metal Gear or crazy robots kind of thing.
So you mean I can't throw on a bear pelt and become a bear warrior?
No berserkers. But speaking on that note, I'm just my own curious because I played it's just something that occurred to me when I see the photo of the Risk Metal Gear, and one of the things that is Outer Haven that moves in ocean spaces,
Okay.
and it looks like there's big spots in ocean spaces. So you might be making bases, like
Mm.
man-made islands, which would still be grounded. I mean, that's literally a big issue right now in the I believe it's the southern China Seas. Like they've made islands there,
Yeah,
which changes the whole, all naval law and stuff like that. So that could be a big thing we see in this.
Yeah, definitely. It does look like there are big spots for stickers. I didn't even notice that
Mhm.
before, but it's like something clearly is going to go there. Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
Well, what I am curious though, you asked about Risk Legacy, but Jamie, what's your thoughts on just Legacy in general, like that game mechanic?
Oh, I think it's fantastic. Like, it depends. There's always the eternal debate about exactly what legacy is, right? Like, is destructibility a necessary part of it or not, or is it the kind of the mystery element of it and things like that? But I mean, we all know the problem, don't we, with games of the you buy a game, you play it twice, 3 times. Like, I think I read somewhere the average play was about 7 times for a game, and that's it. Even then, at that point, you just not play. You just we feel like you got your money's worth at seven, but it's still that idea of like a lot of the reason why you stop playing is because you feel like you've done the game. The game is kind of finished, and that's okay because we have a lot of games in the world. So it's like you don't want to be playing the same game forever because there's so many lovely things to go and try. But at the same time, I think it's a really good way of getting a unique experience every time you play. So like it's one of the focuses of Oathsworn, for instance, just every time you play, you're playing a different monster. You get these mystery boxes, and the monsters are actually the legacy element in this, and the mystery. You don't actually see them until you fight them, and then they come out and they've got their own unique stuff, and then they're done. You just don't fight them again, and you fight a different one next week. And so it's like a sort of episodic kind of thing with each experience is different. So I really love I really love it, and I think Risk Legacy did a fantastic job, and particularly the destructibility in that game was really, like just breaking those sort of like sacred laws for the first time. What that felt like as a gamer. I wonder if that holds up. It's interesting. I wonder if that experience holds up over many legacy games, right? Because obviously at some point, the shock factor of the destructibility, like, does it then become expected? And at that point, then does it not have the same weight? I don't know. Well, how about you guys? You maybe played more legacy games than I have. Does it hold up over multiple times, that destruction?
The destruction, because in my head, usually I would never tear them. All right, it's in the box.
Yeah, we're the wusses who are just like, it's in this section now. We're not going to do that.
But because I've known to make mistakes before. I'm like, oh, that shouldn't have actually been destroyed. But one of the things I've been thinking about, because they're recently on Shelf Stories, there was he had on both Rob Davio and Matt Leacock. They talk about Pandemic Legacy. So just warning, they had some spoilers there too for the entire series. I listened to up to 1. Didn't want to hear about 2 and 3, but it was interesting because that made me think about my own games of Legacy, and I realized my favorite moments in Legacy aren't really the exciting destructive or the twists. And this is where I think King's Dilemma and even Risk Legacy, which I think has some faults just on the risk mechanics, is writing things down. The more that you get to name things and write things, is like that's where I think a lot more of the fun came for me. Because Pandemic, we weren't nearly as hot as everyone seemed to be for season 1. But I think our favorite moments was when we came up with the diseases for the game.
You like to create and leave your mark on the world rather than destroy it.
And Risk does that a lot too with the cities, but also I feel it had more opportunities. This has been out for how long has Risk Legacy been out?
We didn't even finish it, so whatever your spoiler is, it's going to be like 4 games
but
in,
like,
so it's fine.
There are a lot more I feel like huge altering. Like we completely changed how this country is seen now.
Yeah.
It's good. The naming of things is really interesting. That idea of making it your own. I remember because Plague Inc. when it was an app before it was the board game, like playing that, and the funnest part of the game was always coming up with the name for your plague that you were spreading around. The Oozy Snooze or the Creeping Doom or whatever it was you were calling it. You come up with your name, and that was it. It was now your thing that you were spreading around. That's a really powerful part of the game, and I like it when you can still kind of play the game as well at the end when I think Charterstone did that, right? That you could play through the whole thing, and then you had the game that was kind of yours at the end, that you could then play, that still had your history attached to it, but it could still be played as a normal game. Like really, really nice idea.
Yeah, that feels like it's a necessity now. I feel like most legacy games seem to do some version of that
Mhm.
if they can, which is
I
appreciated.
will admit I'm torn on that fact because I don't mind if if it's unplayable, but you would have to go all out. Like when the game ends, you just have this crazy board with let's just go with something like whatever they do in this legacy. Like we've made it so now Asia is also part of Europe because it invaded. It's all one now. And then there's like we've literally destroyed Greenland. I don't know through massive tsunami, wet weather machine or something like something that really shows off just the craziness of what happened.
Yeah, well, I like what My City did, which was it just has a separate board for replayable
Right,
games. Yeah,
and that's like almost the best of both worlds.
yeah, yeah. But there's a lot to like about legacy games. It does seem like they've been slowing down, or maybe they haven't been slowing down as much as the elements have just been so ubiquitous that we don't even think of a lot of games as legacy anymore that have legacy in them.
I think a big shift is to campaign games because I
Right.
feel that still gets
You
the
kind of get the same, and even like you said with Oathsworn, you can do the mystery boxes, you can do that stuff without necessarily tearing cards apart and writing stick things down or whatever it is. But yeah, but I'm definitely interested in Risk Shadow Forces, and I like that it looks like they are moving further away from the traditional Risk gameplay, which I think was the biggest thing holding back the original Risk legacy was the fact that it was Risk.
The one, the one
Yeah,
danger I've got with the things that because they're not calling it. Are they calling it Risk Legacies? Because it's Risk Shadow
it's
Forces, right?
no.
It's
yeah,
not.
that's right.
It's not Risk Legacy Shadow Forces, right?
As at
Um,
least as of now, correct.
yeah, it's interesting because I wonder because obviously there's so many Risk games in the world, aren't there? There's so many different types of Risk out there. I wonder if because obviously if the Legacy was so powerful before as a unique selling point, I wonder if they're going to miss out something by not calling it Risk Legacy Shadow Forces, and maybe there's a reason why they can't
Yeah,
call it that, for instance. But
yeah.
certainly like I wonder if it might in that way be in danger of being lost in the massive Risk games that there are, and people not realizing what they're getting.
I think it's a little bit fine. One, I think that's a very wordy title. Rick's Legacy Shadow
We
Forces.
could've even gone like Risk Legacy Season 2, right? Could have really gone that way. But yeah, I feel like I guess maybe the market that they're going for, which is maybe more the market that knows Risk but doesn't know modern games, and they assume that the modern gamers will find it because they just know about these things, that maybe mainstream audiences don't know what legacy means anyway, so to them it's not. And I guess it's funny to think because at the time, Risk Legacy wasn't. They didn't. I don't think they meant to invent Legacy. Like they didn't think that was the name of a system. That was just, oh, it's called Legacy because you built a legacy, and then everyone else had
Imagine
it.
if the first one was actually called Shadow Forces now, so it'd be
Right.
Pandemic Shadow Forces.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. It's like Metroidvanias and roguelikes. Anyway, but so it retails for about $70, and it is for pre-order right now. We'll see. We'll see when it comes out what the deal is. But let's go back to role playing now. Another new announcement, kind of less of an announcement, more of just a reassurance, because a while back, Fantasy Flight was broken up a little bit by Asmodee. Their miniatures games and their role playing games were kind of handed out to other studios under the Asmodee umbrella. And Edge Studio are the ones who are going to be handling the role playing stuff. And they have confirmed that they are currently working on a new Star Wars role playing game. In addition to that, they are going to be reprinting the old Fantasy Flight ones, Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, and Force and Destiny. So there's no details yet about what this RPG is going to be, but I think people have been waiting for reprints or new adventures or new anything, but it sounds like they're going forward with a brand new system or an evolution of the previous system. Jamie, I don't know if you played any of the Star Wars RPGs, but I imagine you're familiar with the IP. So I wonder what you
Who?
would what you would want to see out of a new Star Wars role playing game.
Oh, oh, I don't. I don't know if it's already out there, but I would. Yeah, I would. I was born in the age of the sort of extended universe of Star Wars for the three films. Well, six,
Mm.
4, 5, and 6. So the what did they end up calling it? Was it Legacy or
Oh,
something on that as well? Or
Legends.
Legends. There we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that was pretty cool because that's my entire childhood right there. In those. But yeah, no, I'm not surprised they got a nice sort of they're pushing the role playing stuff out. It's been an amazing year for role playing. Like it's been the best year I think ever for role playing games. This last year has been amazing. I think there was like 5 or 6 different Kickstarters that did over $1 million with from a role playing game, which is that's quite surprising. Generally, I think Avatar Legends that was like 8 or 9 million they did. So absolutely a really good time for role play. Role play seems to have exploded as well. Again, something that can be done through pandemics and things, right? Easy to run role playing campaigns over
For
Zoom
sure.
and Skype and all that sort of thing. So not surprised to see that this is kind of been ring fenced as being safe and as a good idea to mention. But yeah, what I like, I like the
Mara
more,
Jade, Thrawn.
Thrawn.
Some of
Oh
that
yeah,
stuff.
Thrawn. Yeah, the Thrawn would be good. Yeah, give me a fleet of slaved dreadnoughts. That'd be. Can you do that? How many dice would you need to roll for a fleet of slave dreadnoughts?
Yeah, a lot. 25 maybe. I don't know. As many as you can gather. Will, I know you have played one of the Star Wars RPGs, and I haven't. So I wonder what your opinion on them improving or adding to that system would be.
When I played it, I do think because the way the system worked is you would usually roll a mixture of these good and bad dice. And what tended to happen was like you would get for lack of a better term, a critical hit and a critical miss at the same time.
Right, because it didn't use traditional dice. They had their own unique symbols on them, right?
Yes. And what would come from that is I was a player for this, by the way, but for the GM or whatever they called it, I don't remember. He'd have to be like, well, yes, your backup arrived, but also a Sith Lord who's attacking him. Like you'd have to come up with like the weirdest, like very weird twists. But the idea was, I think, to make it more cinematic. But the biggest issue was it was very hard to top the last roll. I felt like you would have to go crazier each time. But outside of that, like the actual gear and the plans was fun to come up with. It just felt like it was very, in particular, it also felt hard if you weren't very knowledgeable of the Star Wars universe to come up with weird things. Because if you're like, I know Stormtroopers,
how
Jedi.
Could anyone not be? I don't understand. Why would you choose a GM who isn't?
Well, maybe because the person wants to actually be a player. Did not know that at the time.
You saying the law was too restraining for the law? Like if you knew too much, it was hard to come up with the weird, wonderful scenarios.
No, I'm saying if you knew too little. Because if you had to come up with a bunch of different things, if all you know are Stormtroopers, Jedi, and Han Solo, you're like, all right, what do I throw now? You find a lightsaber, which I'm sure if you say that to anyone, they're like, lightsabers are supposed to be rare.
You just find them hanging around now and again.
Yeah, that's how Ray did it, right? Like, you just find them hanging around.
That's right. Yeah, pretty much true. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm definitely interested in this because I love the idea of a Star Wars RPG, and we just never. I don't even remember why I didn't play it with you guys. I just think it was just one of those things where
we were having a hard enough time getting our D&D group together, Jonathan. That's why.
Yeah,
I will say the one thing I did love they did the love that they. The one thing I loved was they also broke it up so you could actually make sure you're playing how the group would want. If you want to make just a whole bunch of Jedis, they had one that's specifically designed like this is if you have a bunch of Force users. Right. You want to be part of the rebellion, they had the rebellion one. If you just wanted to go, be your scum and villainy, they had a set for that too. So I felt like that made it much nicer. So you didn't, because let's be honest, if there's a Jedi among you, probably going to be doing better.
Yeah. I wonder how the new set is if they're going to try to combine that. It's also interesting because they're still printing the other titles. So is this one going to be complementary? It's going to be weird to have both versions out at the same time, or maybe they'll just do a different timeline and kind of continue the same thing. and it won't even feel like a new edition. We really don't know, but we'll find out at some point, hopefully, when they announce more details about this. Now, last announcement is a stupid one, but I thought it was interesting. There's a new Monopoly game coming out. That's right. Everyone, hold on. Don't get out of your chairs just yet. Let me explain.
It's okay. We already talked about Risk.
That's right. This is the Hasbro Classics episode. Monopoly Madness is the name of this one, and it's a video game. And it's coming out in December to pretty much every PC and console and whatnot. And it's a different kind of a twist on the Monopoly game in that it is played in real time. The premise is that I believe the Mr. Monopoly has gone on vacation. So everyone is just running around like crazy, and you're still building up buildings and trying to get money and all that stuff. But you're playing simultaneously in real time video game format. And you can even get power-ups and items like bulldozers that allow you to tear down other players' buildings. And they'll have to try to build them up or tear yours down or something else like that. It's got a very cute, kind of colorful art style. Very looks like a bunch of candy pieces and everything. It's almost saccharine in its design. But I don't know. I think it's interesting that they're trying to still do new things with the Monopoly IP. And certainly we're not, I don't think, big fans of the original Monopoly game, but this is maybe a different kind of a twist on it. Is there any universe, Jamie, in which a Monopoly video game interests you?
Well, yeah. I mean, there was about 25 years ago. Yeah, I remember being on like, what was it? Was it Windows 95 or something? And like Monopoly was up there. You could play that. That was great. You know, the first time I ever saw a CG dice be able to be rolled, that was it. I was so hooked. But yeah, no. I mean, I came crashing down pretty quick after that, I'm afraid.
Yeah,
I wonder.
I don't
Yeah,
blame
what do you think? A Monopoly Legacy? How about that? We could have like this,
Oh,
this
yeah.
collapsing society where just like the rich get richer forever, and you just end up in destitution, and then you've got to find some way out, and you become some sort of weird mole people who live under this city, and you kind of come up every now and then to scrounge for scraps from the feet of the golden temples of super rich.
All right, sign me up. Remind me of when you're next. Notify me when this Kickstarter launches, and I'll be there. Yeah. I mean, they've done like Monopoly Speed version. Obviously, they've had a million different versions of Monopoly, but there have been a few that I feel like they've tried to fix, quote unquote, some of the issues of Monopoly. But this one seems to clearly be taking it in a wackier direction. What do you think, Will? Any interest in the madness?
I mean, I'd be probably more interested if someone's like, I want to play Monopoly but digital, just because that would make things hopefully a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I assume this matches of this game will last 10 minutes or something.
Well, I mean, just comparing to regular Monopoly.
Yeah.
It's just so weird and different. And I don't know. I mean, I'd probably be willing to give it a go once, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a price announced, but it's like, it's probably like $30 or something. But maybe it's 10 or $20. Maybe they'll market it as more of a budget thing.
I don't know. I could see this being a.
You think it's a full price game?
No, I was gonna say the opposite, free to play, because I see so many outfits. I'm like, oh, that's your microtransactions. If you want the dinosaur skin,
they haven't announced it for mobile, so it doesn't seem to me. It doesn't seem likely. It's Xbox, Switch, PC, those kinds of platforms. But they could still have in-game transactions. But
that hasn't stopped.
But I think it'll be a price. is my assumption. So that'll
be $200 Monopoly dollars.
There you go. All you got to do is pass go, and you'll be reimbursed.
You have reached the end of the video, but before you go, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, and maybe try to help us out on Patreon if you can. If you want to hear more from us, we've also got a podcast. This is released weekly, and there'll be links down below for wherever you want to listen to podcasts.